It's another Monday, another war zone. But this isn't about blood and guts, not really. It's about the slow, silent erosion of human dignity played out daily on these overcrowded trolleys in what we euphemistically call the corridor of care. Care? What a bitter joke. This is the corridor of indifference, the grim reality of our NHS. And I see it. I feel it every single shift. My name's Eleonora, and frankly, I'm incandescent with rage. I'm talking about Mr. David Wilson, 87 years old, frail as spun glass, confused and dehydrated. He's been here for 12 hours. 12 hours. He arrived by ambulance this morning, brought in because he'd had a fall at home and couldn't get himself up. Not a major trauma, no, but enough to warrant attention, certainly. Instead, he's been parked, quite literally, by the fire exit, his curtain half drawn, more an afterthought than a patient. I found him earlier, calling out softly for his wife, who passed away 3 years ago. His bladder, bless him, had failed. He was soaked. Not a single person had noticed or bothered to check for hours. Hours. And when I tried to get him cleaned, to make him comfortable, to even get a proper assessment, Dr. Miller just waved a dismissive hand. Eleonora, we have a cardiac arrest in rhesus and a child with suspected meningitis. Mr. Wilson's just got a bit of a cough, likely a UTI. He's old. These things happen. He can wait for a bed on the ward when one frees up. If one frees up, he's old, that phrase. It drips with such a sickening apathy, a casual dehumanization that makes my blood run cold. It's not just a medical problem, is it? It's a social indictment. How many times have I heard it? They're just taking up beds. Their quality of life is already diminished. They've had a good run. As if reaching a certain age is a terminal diagnosis for one's right to respect, to privacy, to basic human kindness. I've seen elderly women left uncovered, men left to shiver under a thin sheet, their pleas for water or a trip to the toilet met with sighs and eye rolls from staff who are, admittedly, stretched beyond breaking point. But even stretched, surely the fundamental ethos of care shouldn't evaporate like this. It's not the individual nurses or doctors who are monsters, not entirely, but the system itself has become one. A monstrous, grinding machine that processes bodies, not people, and deems the elderly an inconvenient clog. I remember Mrs. Davies, 92, with advanced dementia, who spent 2 days on a hard plastic chair because there were no trolleys. 2 days. She soiled herself multiple times, disoriented and distressed, before we could finally get her into a more appropriate space. The humiliation etched on her face, even through the fog of her illness, was palpable. It makes you question everything. What kind of society are we building when we treat our most vulnerable, those who built the very foundations we stand on, with such profound disrespect? We talk about national pride, about being a caring nation. But what I witness here, day in and day out, shatters that illusion. This isn't about diagnosis anymore. It's about dignity. It's about remembering that these are someone's parents, grandparents, someone's loved ones, reduced to a number on a trolley, a burden, and inconvenient. We're losing our humanity in these very corridors. And I feel utterly helpless, yelling into the void, because no one seems to be truly listening, truly seeing the raw, heartbreaking despair of these elderly souls. We, as a society, are failing them catastrophically. And for that, we should all be utterly ashamed. It's just another Tuesday night in A&E, they say. Another endless queue of human desperation, the sterile chill of the fluorescent lights doing little to warm the sinking feeling in my chest. But tonight, it's not just the usual chaos. It's David Wilson, and he's become a stark, painful mirror reflecting all that's broken in this system in us. He's 87, frail, confused, and he's been sitting in that godforsaken waiting room for 6 hours. 6 hours just to be told he's not urgent enough for a proper assessment. When I finally managed to get to him, he was slumped, utterly defeated, his dignity stripped bare by the cold, hard plastic chair. He'd wet himself, bless him. A small, dark puddle stained his trousers, and his eyes, when he finally met mine, were filled with a profound shame that shouldn't belong to a man who's lived nearly a century. He didn't complain, didn't shout. He just mumbled apologies. Apologies. For what? For needing care? For being old? It makes my blood boil, honestly, a slow, simmering rage that never quite fades. Eleonora, love, You can't spend all night on the non-urgent cases Dr. Miller had chirped earlier, breezing past David's corner without so much as a glance. We've got a suspected MI in cubicle 3 and a fractured hip coming in. He's just a bit confused. Probably a UTI. Happens all the time. Just a bit confused. Happens all the time. Those words sting, a poison that seeps into the very fabric of our care here. It's not just a UTI. It's a human being, a man who fought in a war, built a family, paid his taxes, now reduced to a non-urgent case and left to sit in his own urine because his bladder couldn't wait for a system that actively ignores him. This isn't an isolated incident. It's a common, heartbreaking pattern. I see it every single shift. Mrs. Henderson, 83, left on a trolley in a busy corridor for 8 hours, her request for a blanket ignored because we're short-staffed. Mr. Davies shouting for privacy in a Bayside curtained area, his most personal medical history discussed loud enough for the entire waiting room to hear. It's a conveyor belt of despair where the elderly are shunted to the side, deemed less valuable, less worthy of our precious time and resources. We talk about compassion, about the NHS being a beacon of care. But for whom? For the young, the acutely ill, the ones with a clear, fixable diagnosis. The elderly, with their complex, often chronic conditions, their loneliness, their fragility, they become a burden, a drain. Not a person, not someone's father, mother, grandparent. They're just another bed blocker, another statistic in a system groaning under the weight of its own indifference. My heart aches for David, for the silent agony in his eyes, for the quiet humiliation that will follow him home. It's not about finding a medical cure for his confusion. It's about restoring his dignity, acknowledging his worth. But how do you fight an entire culture that has decided these lives are less important? How do you scream loud enough to pierce the wall of apathy that separates our bustling A&E from the quiet, desperate pleas of the most vulnerable? We're so quick to celebrate medical breakthroughs, yet we forget the fundamental humanity at the heart of it all. We forget what it means to care, truly care, when the metrics get in the way, when the targets overshadow true patient experience. This isn't about budget cuts alone, though they certainly don't help. This is about a profound moral decay, a societal blind spot where we've collectively decided that once you reach a certain age, your comfort, your privacy, your very sense of self can be compromised without consequence. It's a betrayal, plain and simple. We fail them not with a lack of penicillin, but with a crushing lack of respect. And I stand here, helpless in the face of it, just a single voice shouting into the void, trying to pull one more person out of the quicksand of neglect before they're swallowed whole by a system that has utterly forgotten its very purpose. This isn't healthcare. It's a slow, agonizing dismissal. Another shift, another torrent of humanity spilling through these doors. But it's not the sheer volume that breaks me anymore. It's the quiet ones, the ones who arrive with their stories etched onto fragile skin, only to be erased the moment they're assigned a number. Look around. The buzz of monitors, the urgent shouts, the relentless scrubbed floors, it all feels like a cold, sterile stage for a daily tragedy. And nobody truly sees it. Not until it's too late. I saw David Wilson wielding yesterday, a man easily past 80, with eyes that held a lifetime of quiet dignity. He'd fallen at home, couldn't get up, lay there for hours. His complaint? Not the pain in his hip, but the sheer embarrassment, the fear of being a bother. He told me this, his voice barely a whisper, as he lay on a trolley in the corridor, right next to the noisy resuscitation bay. Dr. Miller, bless her pragmatic soul, gave him a cursory glance. Hip fracture, probably. We'll get him to X-ray when there's a slot. He's stable, stable. The word hollows out my stomach. Stable, as in not actively dying, therefore not a priority. David lay there for 7 hours. 7 hours. On a hard trolley, covered by a thin blanket that offered no real warmth against the draft from the automatic doors. He needed help to use the bottle, help to shift his weight, help just to reach the glass of water I placed on the floor beside him. Each request, each small intimate need, was met with a sigh from a passing junior or a dismissive hand gesture. We're short-staffed. Eleonora, you know how it is. It's just an old man, just an old man. As if his age automatically strips him of the right to comfort, to privacy, to basic human consideration. I remember Mrs. Davies last month, brought in with a urinary tract infection. She was incontinent, confused. We put her in a bay, but with the curtains half drawn, anyone passing could see her. She cried, quietly, tears rolling down her temples because she'd soiled herself. She kept apologizing for a condition entirely beyond her control, for a failure of our system to afford her the simple dignity of a private, clean space. That shame, that utter humiliation etched onto her face is something I will never forget. It's the same shame I saw creeping into David's eyes as he struggled to pull the blanket higher to hide his exposed legs from the stream of people walking past. This isn't about diagnosis, is it? This isn't about identifying a disease. This is about a profound illness in our system, a societal malignancy that views the elderly not as repositories of wisdom or cherished family members, but as liabilities, as numbers that clog up beds and consume resources. Bed blockers, they're called sometimes in hushed, frustrated tones, as if their continued existence is an inconvenience. The humanity drains out of the corridors, leaving behind only the cold logic of efficiency, which ironically fails even at that. I rage internally every single day. I advocate, I push, I try to grab those extra minutes for a gentle word, a raised curtain, a fresh gown. But I'm just one voice against a rising tide of indifference. We're creating a culture where it's acceptable to leave our most vulnerable to suffer not just physical pain, but the searing pain of feeling utterly worthless, utterly ignored. How can we call ourselves a compassionate society, a humane health service, when we systematically strip away the dignity of those who deserve it most? David Wilson and countless others deserve so much more than a corridor trolley and a dismissive glance. They deserve their dignity, their respect, and our unwavering attention before it's too late, before they and we forget what humanity truly means. I have to stop for a moment. What I see in this A&E goes beyond simple medicine. I ask you, what would you do if this were your grandparent? Ignored, humiliated? We cannot stay silent. Silence is complicity. Get involved. Share this story. Educate yourselves on the rights of the elderly and raise your voice against the system. Now, back to David Wilson. This place, the A&E, it's a meat market. Not for the fresh trauma, the broken bones, the heart attacks. No, not really. It's a meat market for dignity, for the humanity of our oldest. I see it every single shift, every single face line with despair. But sometimes it just breaks you. And tonight, it's David Wilson, 84 years old, frail, confused, brought in by ambulance after a fall at home. No visible injuries, apparently. Just a bit wobbly, dear, the paramedic had said, almost apologetically. Just wobbly, as if that trivializes the sheer terror in his eyes. He's been on that trolley, tucked away in a corridor, for 7 hours now. 7 hours. We're so short-staffed, so utterly overwhelmed that an elderly man whose only crime is living too long and needing help is left to slowly become invisible. I walked past him earlier, offered him a sip of water, and he just stared at me, unblinking, his pajama top askew, his blanket half on the floor. He hadn't asked for the loo, hadn't complained, just waited, as if he'd been conditioned to expect nothing more. Any news on Mr. Wilson, Dr. Miller? I asked, trying to keep my voice even, though my blood was boiling. Miller, bless his indifferent soul, barely glanced up from his chart. Wilson? Oh, he's stable, Eleonora. We've got a major RTC on the way, and that cardiac arrest in Rhesus is still critical. He's fine, just a common cold, probably, or maybe he's just old, just old. The words hang in the air, a poisonous gas that permeates this entire system. Just old, the foremost damning words you can hear about an elderly patient in the NHS. It's a dismissal, an erasure, a convenient excuse to push them to the bottom of the pile. And that's precisely what we do. We stack them up in our overcrowded corridors on trolleys that offer no comfort, no privacy, no dignity. I remember Mrs. Davies last month had a bowel incident on her trolley, just like David probably will if he's left much longer. The shame in her eyes when she realized what had happened, unable to call for help, unable to move. It took us 20 minutes to get to her, to clean her up, to try and restore a shred of her self-respect. 20 minutes because we were too busy with the more urgent cases. What could be more urgent than a human being's basic need for cleanliness, for respect? This isn't just about lack of resources. It's a sickness in the very heart of how we view our elderly. Society casts them aside, deems them unproductive, a burden. And that sentiment trickles down, poisons the well of empathy right into the sterile, cold environment of this hospital. We don't see a life lived, wisdom gained, families built. We see a bed blocker, a complex discharge, a drain on our already stretched services. How can we call ourselves a humane health system when we allow such systemic neglect, such quiet, insidious humiliation? I am a nurse because I believe in caring for people and alleviating suffering. But here, in this suffocating atmosphere of constant crisis, I feel myself screaming into a void. David Wilson, right now, is not just a patient. He is a symbol of everything that is broken. His unheard cries, his silent suffering are a stark indictment of our collective conscience. We are failing them, not just medically, but morally. And until we look this reality square in the face, until we acknowledge that their despair is our failure, this cycle of indignity will continue. It has to stop. It just has to. Look around. Just look. This isn't a hospital. It's a holding pen for the forgotten. Every single day, I walk into this A&E, and the air is thick with the unspoken, the despair, the indifference. It makes my stomach churn, honestly. I'm Eleonora, an A&E specialist, and I've seen things here that would break your heart, things that should outrage every single one of us. We're supposed to be saving lives, alleviating suffering, but what I see is a systemic cruelty, a deliberate turning away from those who need us most. Take David Wilson, 84 years old, frail as a bird. His carer brought him in nearly 12 hours ago with a suspected urinary tract infection. 12 hours. He's been shunted from one hard plastic chair to another, then left on a trolley in the corridor, shivering under a flimsy blanket while the fluorescent lights hummed a desolate tune above him. He's deaf in one ear, and nobody bothered to speak clearly to him. Nobody offered him a proper drink. I watched him try to adjust his blanket with trembling hands, his eyes wide with a quiet, terrified humiliation. He wasn't complaining. He was simply existing, enduring. And that's the worst part, isn't it? That they learned to endure this indignity. They expect it. I asked Dr. Miller about him, politely at first. David Wilson needs to be seen, properly assessed off that trolley, and his response, a dismissive wave of the hand, barely looking up from his notes. He's old, Eleonora. It's just a UTI. We have a gunshot wound coming in, a possible stroke. He's stable. Stable? Stable is not being left to feel like a piece of medical rubbish, ignored and insignificant after a lifetime of contributing to this society. It's just a UTI. How many times have I heard that? As if an elderly person's pain, their discomfort, their fundamental human dignity is somehow less urgent, less valid, simply because of their age. It's an unspoken mantra in these corridors. They're old, they're a burden. Move them along. This isn't about medical urgency alone. It's about basic human respect. I saw David trying to hold himself, needing to use the lavatory, but too proud or too disoriented to ask again after being ignored twice. He ended up having an accident right there on the trolley, hidden beneath his blanket. The sheer shame in his eyes when I found him, when I helped him. It wasn't the accident itself. It was the feeling of being so utterly invisible, so disregarded that he couldn't even retain that most basic privacy. That's not care. That's neglect. That's emotional torment. This isn't an isolated incident. I see it every single shift. Elderly patients left for hours without pain relief, their call bells unanswered, their questions met with curt replies. They are often dismissed as confused or demanding when in reality, they are desperate, disoriented, and scared. We as a healthcare system have become so fixated on efficiency, on metrics, on bed flow, that we've lost sight of the human being at the heart of it all. The sterile coldness of this A&E is a physical manifestation of the emotional coldness that has seeped into our very culture. We see the elderly as a problem, not as people deserving of our utmost compassion. I try, God, I try. I try to be their voice, their advocate, to remind colleagues that these are someone's mother, someone's father, someone's grandparent. But sometimes the indifference is so pervasive, so deeply ingrained, that I feel like I'm screaming into a void where humanity used to be. This isn't just a staffing issue or a funding problem, though those are real. This is a profound moral failure. A society that discards its elders, that tolerates their humiliation, is a society that has lost its way. We need to look ourselves in the mirror, every single one of us, and ask, is this who we truly want to be? Are we truly okay with this silent, systemic cruelty? This isn't a hospital. It's a holding pen, a purgatory of indifference for those who built this nation. Look around. The sterile, unforgiving glare of the fluorescent lights doesn't just illuminate the grime and exhaustion. It exposes a gaping, festering wound in our society. I'm Eleonora, and for 15 years, I've worked in A&E, witnessing raw human fragility. But nothing prepares you for the systematic dismantling of dignity I see inflicted upon our elderly day in, day out. It makes my blood boil. It makes me question everything we claim to stand for. Take David Wilson. He's 84. Came in last night, disoriented with a suspected UTI. We found him slumped in a wheelchair by the cubicle door, shivering, forgotten, for nearly 7 hours. 7 hours. I walked past countless times, thinking someone else had him. His incontinence pad was sodden, his clothes damp. The smell, it wasn't just physical decay. It was the stench of profound neglect. I knelt down, tried to make eye contact, and he just looked through me, bewildered, lost. His family were apparently on their way, but in that moment, David was utterly alone, humiliated, left to rot in plain sight in a place meant to heal. This isn't about a medical diagnosis anymore. It's about basic human decency, about whether we still possess it. Later, I tried to get Dr. Miller to fast-track David for a ward bed just so he could lie down, have some privacy. Miller, bless his cotton socks, just waved a dismissive hand. Eleonora, love, he's 84. It's probably just a common cold, or he's confused. We've got genuine emergency, heart attacks, road traffic accidents. He's old. They get confused. He's old. That phrase, it's a death knell here, an excuse to deprioritize, to dehumanize. It's not just Miller. It's an endemic mindset, a silent agreement that if you've lived too long, you're less deserving of our stretched resources. My helplessness against that ingrained indifference, it's soul-crushing. I think of Mrs. Davies, 91, who broke her hip. She was left on a trolley in a corridor for days, curtains pulled loosely around her for privacy, which is no privacy at all when you can hear every hurried footstep, every shouted conversation. She kept asking for a bed, just a proper bed, so she could close her eyes without feeling exposed. She wanted a cup of tea, but the tea round never reached the corridor. Her tears weren't for the pain of her hip, but for the indignity. She felt like a forgotten piece of furniture, an obstacle in the way of more important patients. This isn't just about underfunding, though that plays a part. This is about a moral decay, a societal shift where the elderly are no longer revered for their wisdom, their contributions, but viewed as a burden, an inconvenience. They're a drain on our resources, taking up space that could be used by a younger, more valuable life. We treat them as if their lives have run their course, as if their suffering is somehow less valid, less urgent. The cold, hard walls of this A&E reflect that callousness back at us. The tension isn't medical. It's a battle for the very soul of our humanity. Who answers for this? Who answers for David shivering, soaked in his own shame? Who answers for Mrs. Davies weeping quietly on a trolley? Not the politicians who parrot platitudes about protecting the vulnerable. Not the administrators who talk of targets and efficiency. It's us, isn't it? It's us as a society allowing this insidious culture of neglect to fester. We have outsourced our conscience to an overburdened system, and then we pretend not to see the consequences. We avert our eyes from the indignity, the despair, the slow, silent erosion of our elders' worth. What kind of future are we building if we discard our past so callously? This isn't just a crisis in our hospitals. It's a crisis in our hearts. Who answers for our elders' silent cries? The silence is deafening.